Thank you all for joining me for this presentation. My name is Christy Eichlin. I use she, her pronouns if you need to know. And I'm going to be talking to you today about the challenges of bisexual representation. And through this project, I hope to be a positive representative of bisexuals and bisexuality. But more importantly, I hope that you take away something and challenge your own beliefs about what sex, gender, and sexuality are and how they should be perceived in our society. A note on my title, you'll notice that this is a reference to the NSYNC song, Bye Bye Bye. It is also a pun, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later when I talk about my project. This is the actual title slide. Okay. Oh, well, see, a surprise was ruined here. I was going to ask you guys what percentage of the LGBT community you thought would be bisexual, and it's 52%. So there you go. This is a very interesting statistic because typically when you think of the LGBT community, there's a large focus on the lesbian and gay populations. However, within the LGBT community, only 31% are gay men and 17% are lesbian. And when you break it down by gender, you see that 33% of LGBT people are bisexual and 19% of men are bisexual. And you can look at this further when you look at the younger demographic. You see that 38% of young LGBT people are bisexual, as opposed to 27% gay and 19% lesbian. And in this graphic, you'll also see that there are pansexuals, queers, others, and other bisexuals. Some of these can also be included in the larger bisexual umbrella, but they are not included here due to self-identification. So a lot of this discrepancy between the visibility of bisexuals and the total number of bisexuals is due to bi-erasure and biphobia. So with bi-erasure, it is perhaps the more insidious of the two. It tends to invade our thinking at a more subconscious level, even when you try to be very cognizant of the, the erasure and the phobia around bisexuality. Bisexuals themselves will also erase bisexuals by failing to recognize the possibility of bisexuality in others. However, it is is perpetuated more by monosexuals, that is to say, heterosexuals and homosexuals. So again, this comes as underrepresentation or misrepresentation, which we'll talk about more with biphobia, as well as statements that everyone is bisexual or everyone is a little bisexual, which makes the uniqueness of bisexuality minimized. And phrases like bisexuality isn't real or bisexuality is just a phase also tend to just erase bisexuality completely. As for biphobia, these are more overt statements or actions. You see stereotypes like bisexuals are inherently greedy, unfaithful, indecisive, or carriers of HIV and STIs. While these things may describe some bisexuals, they cannot be used universally for all bisexuals. So it's very problematic that bisexuals are being characterized time and again with these labels. In addition, a lot of bisexual people experience physical, verbal, and sexual violence, and there are lots of studies to show that they experience these acts of violence at a greater level than lesbian and gay people. So this is where my project comes in. At the outset of my research, I was kind of hoping to develop like a grand theory about like why this is all happening and like maybe make some steps towards solving it myself. But I quickly realized that this is like way beyond the scope of a Keystone project. And so I tried to think of more sensible options. So my project went from being something of, like an innovative idea to something more didactic. And I have decided to look at different texts by bisexual authors and queer theorists and kind of distill the themes that are happening in those texts and figure out what is so challenging about representing bisexuality. So I have created 12 keywords out of this. Biphobia, both and, desire, evidence, fence, gender, politics, puns, queer, scales and graphs, symbolism, and temporality. I mentioned earlier in this presentation about puns. This is something that I've been asked about, so I just want to explain it very quickly to you. Puns, I have discovered, is a way of representing bisexuality, whereas gay people and lesbian people have very distinct visible cultures and styles, ways of dressing, ways of talking. Bisexuals don't have anything so visible or recognizable. So what I've discovered in a lot of my research, a lot of authors, filmmakers, they'll choose to title their books with puns, such as by the way, or by any other name, or representing bisexualities, or representing bisexualities. So there's lots of like punning that goes on in bisexuality, and I wanted to pay tribute to that in my title. Very quickly, I also want to read to you an excerpt from one of my keywords, which you would find in my project, and this is about evidence. Bisexuals have a greater burden in proving their bisexuality in a monosexist society than homosexuals. However, this problematic treatment of bisexuals and bisexuality goes beyond a specific sexuality or identity and is more deeply rooted in our culture's understanding of sex, gender, and sexuality. Kenji Yoshino's seminal text, The Epistemic Contract of Bisexual Erasure, asserts that bisexuality is, quote, threatening to all monosexuals because it makes it impossible to prove a monosexual identity, end quote. Logically, one cannot prove a negative because one cannot have negative evidence. Therefore, heterosexuals cannot prove that they do not experience same-sex or same-gender attractions, and homosexuals cannot prove that they do not experience different sex or different gender attraction. This kind of doubt is not new to homosexuals, whose attractions have long been dismissed by heterosexist society or corrected to fit the heterosexual norm through conversion therapy. As non-heterosexual identities become more visible and respected, heterosexuals are also beginning to experience external and possibly internal doubts of their own sexualities. To preserve their privileged identity in the face of such doubt, heterosexuals perpetuate homophobia and biphobia with their insistence on no homo. So I have created several entries like the one I read before you. They're much longer, about 500 to 1,000 words, and I have made them available on my website bi-representation.com. And it's an easy-to-navigate website. You can search it. Every entry has PDF and Word documents so that you can download them, print them, annotate them, whatever you need to make your own research possible. And the idea is that this kind of information will help other people who are interested in LGBT issues or bisexual issues in particular to learn more, do their own research, and even start that conversation about why the perception of gender, sexuality, and sex are so flawed in our society. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, go ahead. Yes.
Why do you think puns are so widely used by bisexuals?
My guess. The interesting thing about puns is that when you hear a pun, you are hearing two different things at once. So with these examples of by the way, you hear by, the homophone of bi, and so puns in themselves are like the perfect metaphor for bisexuality, where instead of just imagining single gender attraction, you are, in a single moment, recognizing that there is more than one gender attraction. Yes.
So from my knowledge, I have an understanding that bisexuality receives discrimination and prejudice from both the external community, to say like heterosexual people, as well as discrimination within the queer community or LGBT plus. So what would the difference be between, what would the difference or like emphasis be on addressing the discrimination within the queer community as opposed to just addressing bisexuality discrimination as a whole?
That's a good question. Well, it's important to recognize that within the LGBT community, it's a community of minorities, and they are all also being oppressed by heterosexism, which is a social oppressive system that discriminates against anyone who's not heterosexual, cisgender, all of that. So within the LGBT community, it's important to recognize that everyone's being oppressed in this way, but that bisexuals have an extra layer of oppression with biphobia. And so it comes down to really like just acknowledging that bisexuality exists, that bisexuals face these kinds of issues. And while there is some debate about whether identity politics should be pursued further, it's important that these different subgroups within LGBT start to work together and understand what everyone's going through. Yes?
Do you also see similar like erasure of like pansexuals or people who aren't like monosexual or have a single attraction to a single gender?
Right. Yes. So you've probably noticed this is very much about bisexuals, but according to different sources, bisexuals can also include pansexuals, polysexuals, omnisexuals, that whole gambit. And I don't want to erase any of them by just talking about bisexuality, but it is certainly true that all of those different groups suffer the same kind of oppression. Yes?
So that looks, like your website looks incredible, and I'm so excited to like go check it out. What are your like steps moving forward? Do you plan on like building this? Would you make like an anthology, like more terms? Like,
yes, I really do hope. You can view this website right now. It's live, by the way. I haven't put up everything yet, and I will be doing that. But I also hope to look at some more words and maybe even get some different perspectives, so it's not just my own research. While I've been trying to incorporate lots of different authors, I think it'd be interesting to see what another scholar would have to say. Okay, do I have any more time? No, okay, but thank you.